Alright everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is the Jordan Report. I am your host, Robert Jordan. Everyone please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Alright, I've been meaning to do a video on Sweden for a long time, because Sweden and the United States has a lot of similarities. We have two leftist political parties that are determined to flood the country with migrants and illegal aliens, to change the national idea, the culture, and the country. It's working successfully in Sweden. They're well on the way to being replaced by migrants. And so the warning signs are going up. And so this is why I'm going to make the video, because there's a lot of similarities. I just want to show them to you. I'm going to also show you a public service announcement that they show the Swedes over there. Former CEO of Scania warns Sweden is headed for civil war. Military could be required to quell violent unrest in migrant areas. The former CEO of trucking company Scania has warned that Sweden is headed towards civil war due to uncontrolled mass migration. In an interview with Swed TV, businessman Leif Asling said that the arrival of so many new migrants have failed to integrate into Swedish society is creating a fertile ground for violent unrest. So keep in mind, Sweden's only 9 million people. It's a very, very small country. And they've taken in all these people from war-torn Somalia, Iraq, Syria. People literally right out of war zones. We've taken in far too many people from outside. And we have. Those who come from the Middle East and Africa live in a society we left almost 100 years ago, he said. Explosions and grenade attacks have skyrocketed in many Swedish cities, with much of the unrest being blamed on migrant gangs. Sexual assaults and violent crime is also on the rise. Remember, Sweden was isolated. It's very small. They knew very little crime compared to all what's happening to them now. So this has to be a shock to their society. Asling underscored problems with the integration by highlighting his own experience running Scania, where around 90 out of 100 Somalian migrants hired to work for the company were fired or left because they were unable to arrive on time or work in teams. Asling believes that the knowledge transfer necessary for migrants to cope in Swedish society could take a generation to accomplish. The businessman said he hoped that the country's problems could be fixed within 10 years, but if not, civil war could ensue, necessitating that the military be called out to deal with the violent unrest in migrant areas. He doesn't have 10 years, believe me. He doesn't have 10 years. Sweden is right on the brink. But anyway, I'm going to show you what their government is. I told you they have a leftist, globalist government that's determined to destroy their national identity. So what are they doing? They're bringing in even more. Sweden, 89,000 new resident permits handed out in 2019. This was last month. Okay, October the 14th. This was printed last month. Despite the widespread consequences the country has experienced from taking in large number of migrants, immigration into Sweden doesn't appear to be slowing down at all. According to new statistics from the Migration Board, 89,000 residence permits have been granted by the Swedish government in the first 9 months of 2019. Full speed ahead. The people that's most like Sweden and the United States would be California. California would be most like these people. Just all consumed by migrants, illegal aliens, flooding the country with refugees. They're the closest to Sweden. The report says that 89,000 resident permits that were issued, 13,000 were given to so-called asylum seekers, there's that word, including 3,700 quota refugees, 2,300 to migrants who arrived under the Higher Education Act, and 2,100 to migrants with so-called alternative protection requirements. Close to 23,000 residence permits were given to relatives of migrants who already live in Sweden, while another 34,000 permits were handed out to migrants who come to Sweden to work. Remember, Sweden's only 9 million people. This is how many people they've taken in. In the recent years, the phenomenon known as chain migration has increased significantly in Sweden. This is what Trump is talking about. Chain migration. They're trying to stop this It's the exact same thing. It's the exact same agenda. It's just over in Sweden, and they're more advanced. They're further into the process. In 2018, 15,400 relatives of immigrants with work permits were granted residence permits in Sweden. A decade earlier, the corresponding figure was 3,600. Relatives of immigrants now account for 42% of the total labor migration coming from countries outside the EU. A decade ago, that same figure was only 17%. Similarly to other Western countries, those who obtain work permits in Sweden are able to bring their immediate family to also stay and live in Sweden. Most of the relatives of Swedish migrants are coming from Iraq and Syria, two war-torn countries. Now let me show you the public service announcements, because this will show you their end game, and the globalist end game for all of us when you understand it. This is entitled Sweden is Dying. Let me show you what they're telling the Swedes.
Det finns ingen väg tillbaka.
Sverige blir aldrig som det varit.
Europa är i förändring och Sverige behövs som en trygg plats för människor på flykt.
Nu måste vi söka vägar framåt och hitta ett sätt för alla att leva tillsammans.
Det är dags att inse att nya svenskar kommer att ta plats.
Med kultur, språk och vanor.
Och det är dags att se det som en positiv kraft.
Att vara svensk måste få vara mer än hudfärg och födelse ut.
Det måste få vara du, jag och alla tillsammans.
Det är inte bara nya svenskar som ska integreras.
Alla behöver integreras, även etablerade svenskar.
Integration handlar om ömsesidighet.
Låt oss skapa en framtid
Som bygger på lika delar realitet och framtidstro.
Låt oss bygga ett land
Där vi sätter hat och rädsel åt sidan.
Vi har alla det nya landet inom oss.
I våra synsätt, tankar och handlingar.
Det är dags att vi tillsammans formar ett land
som är stolt, inkluderande och hållbart.
Något nytt. Det nya landet.
Okay, so that's the end game, guys. That's the globalist end game. And they're telling the Swedes that Sweden no longer belongs to them and to accept their fate. They're telling them Sweden is dying. But it's not true. Sweden's not just dying. Sweden is being killed.